The animals most deformed by consanguinity, when incest destroys entire species. This is a dark history few know, yet one that has silently shaped the fate of entire bloodlines on the isolated farms of rural America. For decades, consanguineous reproduction practices have driven magnificent species to the brink of functional extinction, leaving behind such severe anomalies they challenge our very understanding of nature. Our investigation opens in 1953, within the secluded mountains of Western Virginia. This is where the Peterson family operated one of the largest Appaloosa horse breeding properties in the United States. Harold Peterson, the family patriarch and a man of limited vision, held a firm belief that he could improve the breed through what he termed blood purification, the systematic mating of closely related animals to lock in desirable traits. In that era, knowledge of genetics was extremely limited among rural breeders, explains Dr. Leonard Mitchell, a historian of veterinary medicine at Cornell. Many operated under the belief that breeding close relatives would intensify an animal's best qualities, completely unaware of the devastating biological consequences that would follow. The Peterson property was situated over 30 kilometers from the nearest town, nestled in a valley encircled by dense, wooded mountains. This geographic isolation afforded Harold the perfect environment to conduct his experiments without oversight or interference. Visitors were seldom permitted, and veterinarians were rarely summoned, even when situations demanded it. In the early years, the outcomes appeared promising. The Appaloosa horses from the Peterson farm displayed stunning coat patterns, marked by unique spots that captivated buyers willing to pay premium prices. But behind this facade of aesthetic perfection, a silent tragedy was beginning to unfold. By 1958, the first foals with visible anomalies were being born. Atrophied front legs, abnormally small eyes, and mandibular deformities were merely the beginning. Harold, however, dismissed these events as isolated birth accidents and pressed on with his practices, now breeding animals that were themselves the products of incestuous relationships. What we see in the surviving veterinary records from that period is alarming, states Dr. Elaine Harris, a geneticist specializing in veterinary medicine. The notes from the sole veterinarian who visited in 1960 describe foals with immune systems so compromised they succumbed to common infections within days. Others were born with exposed organs or had severe cardiac issues that prevented survival beyond a few hours. The situation deteriorated rapidly between 1960 and 1963. Adult horses began exhibiting abnormal behaviors. Some grew inexplicably aggressive, while others developed repetitive movement patterns, shaking their heads incessantly or walking in circles for hours. Mares found it increasingly difficult to conceive, and when they did, they often suffered miscarriages or delivered stillborn foals. The case of the Peterson horses might have remained just another sad, undocumented chapter in American animal husbandry, if not for Raymond Foster. This young National Geographic photographer was in the region in 1964 for a project on the Appalachian Mountains. Foster arrived at the property by chance when his Jeep broke down nearby, says John Harrison, a local historian and author of Secrets of Rural Breeding, The Untold Stories. What he witnessed would forever alter our perception of inbreeding's effects on animal populations. The photographs Foster took, though never published by the magazine due to their disturbing nature, documented the result of 11 years of systematic inbreeding. They showed horses with deformed skulls, misaligned jaws that prevented proper feeding, atrophied limbs, and skin with large, hairless patches. The most haunting features were the eyes. Many animals had microphthalmia, where the eyes are underdeveloped, or anophthalmia, the complete absence of eyes. What Foster captured was the total collapse of a genetic lineage, says Dr. Paul Whitman, a geneticist at the National Institute of Animal Health. Records indicate that by the time of his visit, roughly 78% of the adult animals had some visible deformity, and the foal mortality rate had reached nearly 90%. Harold Peterson, however, seemed incapable of acknowledging his role in the disaster. In personal diaries discovered after his death, he blamed external forces, from water quality to alleged radiation from Western nuclear tests. He never considered that his own breeding program was the source of the catastrophe. Check it out. If you're already subscribed to this channel, make sure you don't miss any of our stories that reveal the darkest secrets of human intervention in nature. These are truths few have the courage to confront. But we all need to know them to avoid repeating the same devastating mistakes of the past. When veterinary authorities in Virginia finally intervened on the Peterson property in March of 1965, they discovered a scene even more grave than Raymond Foster's photographs had suggested. Of the 143 horses originally recorded, only 67 remained alive. Of those, just 12 were in a condition meeting basic animal health standards. The official report contained descriptions that shocked even the most seasoned veterinarians, explains Dr. Margaret Wilson, who accessed the state archives during her research for the Agriculture Department. They found horses with duplicated organs, incomplete digestive systems, and skeletal deformities so severe the animals could barely stand. One of the most iconic cases was that of Midnight Star, a 4-year-old stallion who had been Harold Peterson's pride. This animal, the product of 5 generations of inbreeding, possessed a black coat with perfectly symmetrical white spots, a trait Peterson had intensely selected for. Yet, Midnight Star suffered from a rare cardiac condition. His heart had only 3 functional chambers instead of 4, forcing the animal to live in a constant state of hypoxia and exhaustion. The case of Midnight Star perfectly illustrates the core problem of intensive inbreeding, says Dr. Thomas Reynolds, a veterinary geneticist. Harold selected solely for the visible trait of the coat, not understanding he was simultaneously concentrating deleterious recessive genes that would normally remain hidden in a diverse population. The science behind this disaster is complex, yet fundamentally clear. When closely related animals reproduce, the probability that offspring inherit 2 copies of the same harmful gene increases dramatically. In healthy populations, these problematic genes are diluted by genetic diversity. Think of it as a deck of cards, explains Dr. Harris. If you have a full deck, your chance of drawing a specific card is small. But if you remove most cards, leaving only a few suits, your chance of repeatedly drawing the same card increases exponentially. This is what happens with harmful genes in inbred populations. Lab tests on the surviving horses revealed alarming levels of homozygosity, a condition where an organism has identical gene copies on both chromosomes. While healthy horse populations show homozygosity rates of 3 to 10%, the Peterson animals displayed rates between 42% and 68%. With such homozygosity levels, it wasn't a question of if genetic problems would appear, but how many and how severe, states Dr. Whitman. The immune system, embryonic development, metabolism, all fundamental biological systems were compromised. The damage was not limited to physical deformities. Veterinarians noted profoundly disturbed behavioral patterns. Mares systematically rejected their foals, an extremely rare behavior in healthy horses. Other animals exhibited self-harming behaviors, biting their own flanks until causing serious wounds or repeatedly hitting their heads against stall walls. What we were observing was the collapse not just of the physical body, but of neurological systems as well, explains Dr. James Bradford, a neuroscientist who later studied preserved brain tissue from the Peterson horses. Post-mortem analyses revealed significant malformations in the hippocampus and other brain structures crucial for instinct and emotional regulation. One of the most tragic aspects was the prolonged suffering imposed on the animals. Harold, unable to recognize his practices as the cause, refused to euthanize even the most severely afflicted horses. Records show many severely deformed animals were kept alive for years, unable to perform basic natural behaviors like running, grazing properly, or socializing normally. The Peterson case was not only a genetic disaster but a monumental ethical failure, says Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, a veterinary ethics expert. By prioritizing his distorted vision of purity over animal welfare, Harold created a living hell for those creatures. Investigations revealed Peterson had systematically falsified pedigree records, selling inbred foals as if from diverse bloodlines. Between 1955 and 1963, he sold roughly 200 horses to farmers in at least 12 states, spreading compromised genes through a significant portion of the national Appaloosa gene pool. The impact of the Peterson case extended far beyond that isolated property, explains Dr. Mitchell. For decades after the intervention, Appaloosa breeders across the country kept discovering genetic anomalies traceable back to Peterson's animals. Some of these mutations persist in the breed to this day, albeit at much lower frequencies thanks to deliberate genetic diversification efforts. If you are watching and feel the same indignation as I do, leave a comment. Nature deserves respect, not destructive interference. We need to make this message echo so that stories like these are not repeated. If you've made it this far, you must be invested in this story. Leave a comment saying I watched here so I can get to know you and see who truly appreciates the stories on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe to follow our investigations that uncover the darkest, most educational truths about humanity's impact on the animal kingdom. Leave your like to support this work of awareness, and share it with friends and family who should know these important lessons about the consequences of animal inbreeding. Together, we can advocate for a future where respect for genetic diversity and animal welfare guides our breeding and conservation practices.